because I am the hottest there is right now. It's, believing in yourself, training, saying your prayers, and eating your vitamins, getting out here and living this thing 24 hours.
That him right here, and I went, oh my God.
Look at this.
He was America's hero. Muscles, mustache, red and yellow pride, a symbol of strength for millions. But behind the shades and flexed biceps was a man unraveling. By the time the camera stopped rolling and the crowd chants faded, Hulk Hogan, or the man behind him, Terry Bollea, was staring down the barrel of a loaded gun. Literally. So how did he go from that to this? How did Hulk Hogan go from the top of the world to its lowest trenches, only to crawl back, one painful step at a time? Because this isn't just a story about wrestling. This is a story about ego, betrayal, survival, and the American obsession with watching heroes fall.
And now, Terry Hulk Hogan has passed away at the age of 71. Look, I don't care how somebody votes.
Let's get into it. Before the bandanas, before the arena lights, and before the world ever chanted his name, Hulk Hogan was just Terry Bollea, a shy, heavy-set boy trying to survive in a cramped Florida home that measured barely 650 square feet. His father worked long hours digging trenches under the blistering sun, laying storm drains for construction crews that barely knew his name. His mother stayed home, playing piano and raising the family as best she could. But love didn't erase the stress. Conversations about bills were never whispered. They were sharp, raw, and constant. Every month was a countdown to payday. Every dollar was watched, and every decision, even for a toy, had weight. It was in that chaos that Terry quietly decided, this won't be my life.
Hulk Hogan has tragically passed away at the age of 71, and the only thing to blame for this death early on is steroid abuse. Hulk Hogan, whose real name is...
The turning point came in the form of something small, almost forgettable. A pink toy gas truck. Given to him as a kid, it became a totem. A reminder of what struggle felt like, what sacrifice looked like. He held on to it for decades, not for nostalgia, but for fuel. Every time he looked at that little truck, he remembered what it meant to go without, and why he'd do anything to never feel that powerless again. But unlike other kids drawn to football fields or baseball diamonds, Terry didn't crave the spotlight. He avoided fights. He feared confrontation. And he never once saw himself as a tough guy. In fact, for much of his youth, he felt like the exact opposite. He was relentlessly teased for his size, his large head, his awkwardness.
And they'd just be beaming. And you can't feign the type of joy that Hulk brought to those kids.
While other boys flirted and flexed, he kept his head down, unsure of how he fit into the world. He didn't have a girlfriend until his senior year of high school, and even that felt like a fluke. Deep down, he believed he was invisible, and maybe, for a while, he was. But there was one thing that gave him a voice: music. His mother's love of the piano had quietly rubbed off on him, and by the time he was 12, his father did something extraordinary. He bought Terry an expensive guitar. That instrument became his escape. In music, there was no teasing, no pressure, just freedom. Terry threw himself into it, joining bands, playing gigs, chasing something that felt bigger than his tiny hometown.
I'm a lifelong wrestling fan. I've loved wrestling since I was a little kid. I loved Hulk Hogan growing up. His cameos in...
Weekends weren't for parties. They were for performances. He was out late, earning money through music, trying to turn his passion into a career. His dream wasn't to become a hero in tights. He wanted to make a living doing what he loved, without ever needing to rely on anyone else. But fate had other plans. Because just when it seemed like music might be the door out, life, once again, shifted. Bandmates got married. Responsibilities grew. And the dream of touring? It evaporated. Almost overnight. So there he was again. 20 years old, broke, disillusioned, and back at square one. But Terry Bollea wasn't the same boy he'd once been. He'd lost the weight. He'd started lifting. And though he still wasn't a fighter by nature,
911 operators stated he was suffering from cardiac arrest. Several weeks ago, Hogan's wife, Sky, denied rumors
he had transformed into someone who looked like he could destroy a man in the ring. The kid with the pink toy truck was about to disappear. And in his place, a legend was about to be born. By the late 70s, Terry Bollea had no band, no plan, and no backup. But he had one thing going for him: his size. At 6'7" with a body sculpted by hours at the gym, people were starting to take notice. And not just any people, wrestlers. In Tampa, Florida, the local wrestling scene was buzzing. Small promotions, tough men, real pain, no frills. It was gritty, underground, and raw. A friend introduced Terry to a few people in the business, and word got out that a massive guy with star potential was hanging around town.
He was doing fine, and then obviously this has come out today. So that's all we know at the minute. I'll keep...
It didn't take long before he found himself face to face with his first trainer. And then, the illusion shattered. Most people think wrestling is fake. The outcome might be scripted, but the pain is real. And Terry learned that the hard way. On his very first day of training, before he could even lace up boots properly, his trainers deliberately broke both of his legs. Yes, broke them. On purpose. It was a test, a brutal one. If you came back after that kind of hazing, it meant you were serious. If not, you were forgotten. Left behind like all the other wannabes, most guys wouldn't return. Terry did. Week after week, he kept showing up, limping, pushing through the pain. He was determined. Not because he loved violence, but because he hated giving up.
Yes. Wow. So live reaction here on air.
Wrestling became the new escape, the new performance, the new stage. But it wasn't enough to be big. He had to become someone people remembered. And that's when Hulk Hogan was born. The name came later, the mustache, the ripped shirts, the red and yellow. But even from the start, promoters saw the potential. There was something electric about him. He didn't move like a veteran. He didn't sell like the old pros, but he had presence. And presence could be taught to scream louder than talent. He moved fast through the ranks, faster than most. And by the time Vince McMahon Sr. brought him into the WWF, Terry Bollea was gone. Hulk Hogan had taken over. He was a larger-than-life superhero.
Paid tribute to Hulk Hogan. He, of course, spoke famously at the RNC last year, where he gave an incredibly memorable speech before
a walking billboard for muscle, might, and morality. He told kids to say their prayers, eat their vitamins, and believe in themselves. He was invincible in the ring, and fans ate it up. But what no one saw behind the screaming crowds was how much he was already breaking. Because wrestling had found him. But it didn't care if it destroyed him. By 1984, Hulk Hogan had become more than a wrestling character. He was a symbol of strength, patriotism, and near superhuman will. The WWF wasn't just building a sports entertainment empire, it was building it on his back. And the weight? It was heavier than any opponent he would ever lift. After his explosive WrestleMania 3 moment, where he body-slammed the 700-pound Andre the Giant in front of a sold-out Pontiac Silverdome, the world didn't just see a performer. They saw a god. The audience didn't question where Hulk Hogan ended and Terry Bollea began, and that's because Hogan never let them see it. He couldn't. For the better part of a decade, Hogan became the single most bankable star in professional wrestling. Millions of children idolized him. Parents trusted him. Sponsors lined up to be associated with him. He was on cereal boxes, action figures, Saturday morning cartoons, even hosting the Hulk Hogan Rock and Wrestling Show. But what started as a stage name was now a prison. There was no room for mistakes. Not in public, not in interviews, not in his personal life. Every handshake, every autograph, every smile in the airport had to be real, even when everything in his body was breaking down. His public persona became a 24/7 performance. And as the money poured in, so did the expectations.
Is the be-all and end-all when it comes to this business.
Vince McMahon had found his golden goose, and Hogan was expected to carry the WWF on his shoulders. Injuries be damned. And there were many, years of leg drops. His signature move were shredding his spine. His knees, hips, and back were screaming for mercy. He pushed through it all with taped-up limbs, cortisone shots, and sheer willpower. Painkillers and anti-inflammatories became part of his daily routine. But fans didn't see that. They weren't supposed to. To the world, he was immortal. But backstage, in hotel rooms, and in quiet moments, Terry was crumbling under the weight of the persona he had created. Because being Hulk Hogan meant there was no space for pain.
You really get beer muscles. Is that true?
Well, the truth is, truth be told, before I wrestled, I always kept it.
No space for insecurity. no space to just be human. The duality was suffocating. Terry Bollea, the man, had been slowly disappearing. What people wanted, needed, was Hulk Hogan. The louder-than-life, righteous, invincible gladiator who would fight evil in the ring and teach kids to say their prayers and eat their vitamins at home. He'd created a character so beloved, so globally recognized, that even he started to lose track of where it ended. It didn't matter if he was going through personal struggles. It didn't matter if he was tired, if he was hurt, or if he just wanted to be off for one night. The brand came first. The machine came first. The legend had to keep living. And for a while it did.
First of all, Hulk Hogan is a legend. He was actually my childhood hero.
He starred in movies, made talk show appearances, and even dipped into reality television. Hulk Hogan was everywhere. He was the WWF. But every superhero has a breaking point. And for Hogan, the real battle wasn't in the ring with The Undertaker or Randy Savage. It was with himself. Because the higher he climbed, the farther he had to fall. And when the fall came, it wouldn't just bruise his body. It would threaten to destroy everything. By the early 2000s, Hulk Hogan was still a household name. But the tides were shifting. Wrestling was changing. The golden age of larger-than-life good guys was fading. And while Hogan remained iconic, he was no longer the unstoppable force he once was in the ring. But it wasn't just his career that was evolving. His personal life was starting to fracture in public view.
People always wanted to paint us as enemies, but we were actually very...
He and his wife Linda had been together since the height of Hulkamania. She had been by his side through the rise, the fame, the injuries, and the millions. But something had changed. Behind the scenes, their marriage was quietly unraveling, and the cameras were about to catch all of it. In 2005, the Hogan family invited the world into their home with the premiere of Hogan Knows Best. What was supposed to be a fun, wholesome reality show quickly became something else entirely. The tension between Hulk and Linda was thick. Fights, distance, frustration. Viewers saw glimpses of a marriage strained under decades of fame, expectations, and emotional neglect. But what the audience saw was just the surface. The real breakdown was far messier.
No, I've had like 25 surgeries in the last 10 years.
That's it.
Yeah, 10 back surgeries. Nobody...
As filming continued, Hogan clung to the hope that the show would somehow save his family. That the success, the attention, the money, the schedule would give everyone something to be proud of. But it didn't. Instead, the cameras magnified their problems. By 2007, Linda filed for divorce, and it was brutal. Public, expensive, and deeply personal. She walked away with 70% of everything Hogan had built. Properties, assets, reputation, and the pain wasn't just financial, it was emotional. The family he had tried to hold together, through fame, injuries, and 1,000 performances, was slipping away.
He was MAGA all the way. He said, I wish I got this. He said, I've always loved you. You know, we've always been friends. But he wasn't a political guy.
Both of his children, Nick and Brooke, were pulled into the spotlight too. They were growing up under surveillance, under pressure, and without the space to be kids. Brooke pursued music. Nick got into cars, racing, speed, adrenaline, the kind of high that can only come from pushing limits. And then, everything shattered. In 2007, Nick Hogan was involved in a horrific car accident. His passenger, 22-year-old former Marine John Graziano, was left in a permanent vegetative state. The crash wasn't just tragic, it was a scandal. The media tore the Hogan family apart. Nick was charged with reckless driving involving serious bodily injury and later sentenced to jail.
Why have AEW ignored Hulk Hogan's passing? After the passing of the legendary Hulk Hogan yesterday, tributes have flooded in from various...
Hulk Hogan, already broken from the divorce, now faced every parent's nightmare, watching his child pay the price for a split-second decision that changed 2 lives forever. The court of public opinion wasn't kind. Jailhouse phone calls were leaked, revealing uncomfortable conversations about money, reality shows, and public image. Critics said it was tone-deaf, selfish, even opportunistic. But what the public didn't hear were the nights Hulk cried alone, replaying that crash over and over in his head, asking if he was somehow to blame for not setting the right example, for letting the cameras into their lives, for not seeing the crash coming. The invincible Hulk Hogan, the red and yellow warrior who slammed giants and told kids to believe, was now just Terry Bollea.
I met Hulk Hogan, and Hulk Hogan, he may have been a racist ass nigga, but he liked me though.
Alone, divorced, broke, and for the first time, dangerously close to ending it all. Because behind the mask, behind the legend, behind the millions of fans, there was still a man. And that man had reached the edge. By 2010, Hulk Hogan's public image was hanging by a thread. His marriage was over. His son had just been released from jail. His finances were in ruins. And the once invincible icon who built an empire with red and yellow tights was now just broken. Behind closed doors, he was spiraling. He was staying at a friend's house in Florida, alone in a bathroom, gun in hand, ready to end it all. The years of pretending, of carrying the brand.
That man is one of the most important, famous of something I love, wrestling.
Yeah. Of keeping a smile on his face while his life collapsed. It had finally caught up. He admitted it himself. He had the gun in his mouth. The only reason he didn't pull the trigger? A phone call. Layla Ali, Muhammad Ali's daughter and Hogan's co-host on American Gladiators, randomly called just to check in. That moment, that voice, that small act of human connection was enough to make him pause. He didn't tell her the truth right away. But her call reminded him, someone cared. Someone still saw him as more than a headline or a disgrace. But Hogan's nightmare was just beginning. Because what came next would be the most humiliating and explosive scandal of his life.
Mate, how gifted some of these behemoths are, and he was the most gifted of all.
It was what he said during the tape. Hogan had been caught using the N-word, expressing disgust over his daughter Brooke dating a black man. The video went viral. Overnight, the man who had once been America's all-American hero was now facing allegations of racism, hypocrisy, and betrayal. Sponsors dropped him. TV deals vanished. The WWE, the very company he helped build, fired him quietly in the middle of the night. He became radioactive, and for many fans, that was it. The fall was complete. Hulk Hogan, the hero of their childhood, had died. Not in the ring, but in a hotel room, with a leaked tape and a single word that shattered decades of goodwill.
You didn't know the Hulk unless you knew the Hulk. The Hulk Hogan had a heart of gold.
And yet, Hogan didn't disappear. Instead of denying it, he admitted it. He didn't defend his words, but he did try to explain them. He acknowledged the pain he caused, the shame, the regret. If the tape never leaked, he once said, I probably would have said that word again. That's how lost I was. The man had hit bottom. Publicly, privately, spiritually. But in that wreckage, after the firings, the lawsuits, the isolation, something shifted. He began to rebuild, not Hulk Hogan, not the persona, but Terry. Because when the legend was burned to the ground, that was all that was left.
Guess who died? Hulk Hogan.
Shut up.
Swear to God.
When you've lost your marriage, your money, your family's trust, and the world turns its back on you, what's left? For Terry Bollea, it wasn't fame. It wasn't muscle. It wasn't even redemption. It was faith. After the Gawker tape leaked and his world imploded, Hogan didn't just walk into court with lawyers and PR teams. He carried a yellow legal pad covered in handwritten prayers. Not strategies, not arguments. Prayers. I'm only victory, perfect health. God fights and wins all battles. That's what he wrote. Page after page. Not for show, but because for the first time in his life, Terry wasn't trying to play a hero. He was trying to be one. For himself.
History, and to deny the impact he had on professional wrestling would be a little bit insane.
And somehow, the scandal that should have erased him actually gave him a second act. When Gawker refused to take the tape down, he sued. And in 2016, in one of the most shocking courtroom moments in internet history, Hulk Hogan, against all odds, won. The jury awarded him $140 million. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was symbolic. A man mocked, humiliated, and discarded by the machine of fame, had stood up to it and won. The final settlement ended up being $31 million. But by then, the money wasn't the point. For the first time, Terry Bollea wasn't just playing the strong man. He was living it. He had remarried, this time to Jennifer, a quiet, spiritual woman who never cared about the fame, the name, or the legend.
Does not mean heart attack. A heart attack can lead to a cardiac arrest. A cardiac arrest is when your heart or lungs stop.
She just cared about him. With her, he began living differently. Fewer shows, fewer cameras, more walks on the beach, more listening, more healing. He opened Hogan's Beach Shop in Florida, not to relive the past, but to celebrate it. The fans still came. The old music still played. The 24-inch pythons were now covered in scars, but fans didn't care, because Terry wasn't selling fantasy anymore. He was sharing truth. He wasn't a god among men. He was just a man who got back up. And in that simplicity, he found something even stronger than fame. Peace. By now, most celebrities from Hogan's era have faded into nostalgia. Old posters, a few throwback memes, maybe a cameo if they're lucky.
I knew how Hulk Hogan really felt about my race. This is the man that without him, wrestling wouldn't be where it is.
But Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea, is still here. Why? Because unlike most stars who pretend the fall never happened, Hogan dragged every scar into the spotlight, and people saw themselves in the wreckage. He was never the fastest, never the most technically gifted wrestler in the ring. What made Hulk Hogan unforgettable wasn't his moves. It was his presence. He knew how to command emotion, how to work a crowd, how to tell a story. But the most powerful story he ever told wasn't scripted in a ring. It was the one that unfolded over decades in tabloids, courtrooms, hospitals, and rehab facilities. In his prime, Hogan was a mythic figure, a muscle-bound superhero for a generation of kids who wanted to believe in something simple: good versus evil, right versus wrong, prayers and vitamins.
Rest. So he passed away in Clearwater, Florida. They say they received the call around 9:51 in the...
But the real story, the one that endures, wasn't about a clean-cut hero who always did the right thing. It was about a man who didn't, who messed up, badly, publicly. He said things he shouldn't have said. He trusted the wrong people. He watched his family break apart. He saw his son locked in a jail cell and knew the world blamed him. And when the camera turned on him, not the wrestler, but the man, he didn't run. He stood there in front of millions, raw and exposed. That's when something strange happened. People didn't cancel him. They related to him. Because the crowd that once cheered for the superhero now saw themselves in the man underneath the costume. They saw someone who had faced the unthinkable and didn't pretend it hadn't happened.
Since you are one of the GOATs or the GOAT, who's on your Mount Rushmore?
Well, that's a tough one, you know.
He took the hits, owned the pain, and kept moving. He says now that he's had 17 surgeries. His knees are fake. His hips are replaced. His back is full of metal. He's lost height, money, pride. And in some ways, the respect of an industry he helped build. But even after all of that, Hogan still walks into airports and gets mobbed. He still gets letters from fans who watched him leg drop Andre the Giant in '87, and letters from fans who saw him cry in court in 2016. Because what they're really seeing now isn't a hero who always won. It's a survivor, a symbol of resilience in a world that doesn't always offer redemption. And that's what makes his story more than just a wrestling highlight reel. That's what makes it timeless.
Hulk Hogan has died at age 71. The wrestling legend was reportedly carried into an ambulance on a stretcher after medics were dispatched.
In a culture obsessed with perfection, Terry Bollea's legacy is built on imperfection, on falling, breaking, rebuilding, in front of the whole world. Not everyone is strong enough to come back from that. But he did. And that's why, even now, decades after his last real match, Hulkamania still runs wild. For all the redemption arcs and spiritual awakenings, there's one truth Terry Bollea has never fully escaped. He is both Hulk Hogan and the man who played him. And even now, years after the ring has gone quiet, you can still feel the tension between the two. There's Terry, the man who plays guitar, who breaks down talking about his brother's death, who found peace with a woman the world barely knew. And then there's Hogan, the icon, the showman,
Just before 10 a.m. today, Clearwater Fire and Rescue, along with the Clearwater Police Department, responded to a house in the 1000 block of El Dorado Avenue for
The myth who once claimed God created the heavens and earth in 7 days, and then on the 8th day, made 24-inch pythons. They live in the same body, but they don't always speak the same truth. Even in recent years, Hogan has hinted at politics, at comebacks, at maybe one more run, one more spotlight. But is that ambition? Or is it a deep, lingering fear that if he ever stops performing, he'll disappear? It's a question that haunts many icons. When the fame fades, what's left? Terry says he's content now. He smiles more. He forgives. He believes in vibrations, prayer, the power of words. But he also walks into his beach shop every day under a giant Hulkamania banner.
Hulk Hogan has passed away. At the age of 71 years old, Hulk Hogan has passed away. Now, I was never the biggest...
Because even if Terry Bollea has moved on, the world still wants Hulk Hogan. And maybe, just maybe, so does he. Because for all the damage it did, being Hulk Hogan was the only time the world truly listened. And sometimes, even the strongest man in the world doesn't want to be forgotten. Not yet. Hulk Hogan was never just a wrestler. He was an idea, a symbol, a living cartoon hero in red and yellow, yelling about prayers, vitamins, and doing the right thing. But Terry Bollea, the man behind the voice, was always more complicated. He stumbled. He fell. He lost people he loved, broke his body beyond repair, and said things that cost him everything. But somehow, he kept showing up. Not as a perfect man, not as a flawless role model, but as someone who never stopped trying to rebuild what he lost, even when the world turned its back.
His home in Clearwater, Florida today, he was pronounced dead. Now, we don't really have much more information about...
In a culture that loves to crown heroes and tear them down just as fast, Hogan's story stands out for one reason. He survived. Not just the ring, not just the scandals, but the brutal process of growing old in front of the entire world. And in the end, maybe that's the real lesson. That strength isn't just about muscles or headlines. It's about owning your scars, facing your past, and refusing to disappear when the crowd stops cheering. Hulk Hogan may be fading from the spotlight, but Terry Bollea, he's finally stepping into it. And this time, he's not playing a character.